The Eagles are Super Bowl champions. They beat the Patriots 41-33, Super Bowl 52 last night in Minnesota. Nick Foles, your Super Bowl MVP. Surprised a lot of people. Doug Peterson gets it done in his second season up there with Philadelphia. I'll give you an interesting stat on him in just a couple of minutes, but we have a call here. Phone lines are open, 737-7767. The number lines certainly open for you at this point. Mark has been kind enough to call in. Mark, you will lead us off tonight here on Sportsline. What did you think of the game last night?
I couldn't get it. It's nobody broadcasted. Channel 4, according to Dad, I can't get Channel 4. He claimed that they gave you the score every 10 minutes of commercials or something, but they didn't cover the game. Nobody covered the game.
What do you mean nobody covered the game?
Channel 17, Channel 30, nobody covered it.
What do you mean?
On 5, it wasn't on TV.
The Super Bowl was on NBC.
NBC, okay. Well, see, I don't get NBC, but Dad does. And he claims that they would show about 10 minutes of commercials and then tell you the score, and it was like 9 to something, and they hadn't even shown the game yet, just commercials, and said there's so many commercials they didn't show any of the plays. They didn't show the football game. He claimed they were just blown away with commercials.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think someone there is being, I don't want to say necessarily facetious, but just exaggerating the fact. There are a lot of commercials in the Super Bowl. People pay $5 million for a 30-second spot or more than that. But the reason I didn't watch it is because I can't get Channel 4, and I was astonished that Channel 2 didn't cover it, or Channel 5, or the major network channels. You'd think they'd all cover the Super Bowl. You can't broadcast a game that's owned by another network. I mean, that's why these networks pay so much money to have the rights to NFL games, is so you get a Super Bowl somewhere along the line, and then you can charge those outrageous fees for commercials in it. And yesterday was NBC's opportunity, and so they had exclusive rights to do it.
They covered the playoffs. Why didn't they cover the commercials? I mean, the Super Bowl. Because NBC had the Super Bowl game. Well, I think that's why so many people didn't watch it, though, because if you don't get NBC, you can't, nobody else covered it. Well, I don't know your specific TV situation, Mark. I appreciate the call. But, I mean, look, these are all these are all non-cable networks. They're your major broadcast networks that host the Super Bowl. That's not the issue. It's not that too many people don't have the ability to watch the game, because it's there for pretty much everybody. But it is an issue for the NFL now of what do they do going forward. They're having these cord-cutting issues with all of their broadcasters. I think they're having an issue with oversaturation. These Thursday night games, Sunday morning games at times when they're playing over in London. You got the 3 windows on Sunday. You've got Monday Night Football. It's a lot of football, and especially if you're into college football as well, and you have all-day football on Saturday, and the type where the thing about college is there's so much football going on at once that if you hit a dud of a game, you switch the channel and you go to something else. The NFL now has all these windows, so they have multiple opportunities, but if you hit a dud, unless you pay for the extra packages, so unless you're willing to pay for consuming the extra packages that they have, you are going to not be able to find another game. So if the game you're watching turns out to be a dud, you're stuck with it. And chances are maybe you turn off the TV and move to something else. Those are all problems the NFL faces. I think they also have to deal with this political climate. People are upset about the politics of the league. People are certainly upset over the protests that took place during the national anthem. The league should have addressed that at the beginning. They certainly should have addressed that last offseason. But now I think they have no choice but to address it moving forward. What they do, I don't know. Do they make a rule that requires every player, some of whom have decided to take a knee or decided to raise a fist or speak out in some way during that over the past season or season and a half? Do they now decide to tell those guys, I don't care what you've done before, but now moving forward, you will stand and you will not demonstrate during the national anthem? Or do they maybe just say the teams aren't going to be on the field during the national anthem moving forward? I don't know. But I think the NFL has to do something given what goes on there.
A lot of questions, a lot of things to deal with if you're the NFL. You are still king. I mean, a 46 rating in Nashville, a massive rating overall. I mean, nothing's going to beat this on television this year. That's clear. This is still the biggest audience that you're going to get for anything on television. So I'm not trying to say the end is near for the NFL or anything like that. But big picture, the game that should be the most bulletproof to whatever's going on in the National Football League is the Super Bowl. Because some people, frankly, turn the Super Bowl on only to see the commercials. Some people turn it on only to check out the national anthem and the halftime show, or just to hang out with their friends. That's the event that the Super Bowl is beyond the game. But when you look at the NFL ratings throughout the course of this year, and they're down, they're down, they're down, then the playoff ratings are down, and then you get to that day that you think should be bulletproof, and all of a sudden it turns back that you're double digits down in places. Man, if you're an NFL executive, if you're an owner, I think you have to sit back and start asking yourself some tough questions about how you turn that trend around. And I don't think it's a one-fix answer, but I think it's now time. There was a while there where the NFL could do no wrong. Everything they trotted out there, the game just kept getting better. The stars just kept getting bigger. The star on the NFL, the shine of the league, and the shield just glowed more and more year in and year out. And the revenue just kept coming and coming and coming. And it was clearly the king. It was passing everything up, and it was lapping them, frankly. Well, now all of a sudden, for all of these reasons, the growth is kind of stagnant. And maybe even in the ratings, which will eventually lead to the revenue with television sides, it's dipping back a little bit. Some of that is cyclical. Maybe some of it's just the law of averages, as meteoric as the rise was. But when you're in a position to run the business, as these owners and the executives around the league, Roger Goodell, are, you have to ask yourself the questions. You have to figure out what the next step is for the league. And that is what they have to figure out tonight. We go back to the phones. Let's say hello to Thomas. Thomas, good evening.
Hello.
Yeah, good evening. You're on the air.
Yeah, I enjoyed the football game. I was for the Patriots, but and I think some of the calls were a little questionable. But the thing I think is going on with NFL football, and everybody will call it everything else they want besides what it actually is the way that the players act and the disrespect for the national anthem and that. Because I went to a Titans game, I live here in Nashville, this year, and when they stayed in the locker room for the national anthem, I left the game.
Yeah. And
that's impacting things a lot more than anybody will even admit. And I think that it's too bad that the commissioner didn't take any stronger action on that.
Well, I think they admit it now. I think they understand that they have a problem, at least from a PR perspective, of the whole thing. Thomas, I want to ask you one thing, because you're certainly not alone on this. But the one question I always ask people who were fed up when the protest happened, the day you're specifically talking about, every team in the league essentially did something. Some guys took a knee, other guys stayed in the locker room like the Titans did, and the Seahawks, they made a joint agreement that both teams would just stay back in the locker room that day. And that was specifically in regard to President Trump talking about the protesters and the NFL not getting them in line and basically saying you should fire the bums if they continue to do that. And the players took umbrage to that and then specifically protested that day. But for instance, in the way the Titans did it, they stayed back in the locker room that day, and I know people were upset. But then they were on the field every week from that point on for the rest of the year. And at least the Titans were very specific about, this is not about our military. This is not about the flag. If we're not going to protest the anthem moving forward, we're going to be out there and we're going to be standing just like we do all the time and facing the flag and respecting our country. Not every individual did that around the league. I understand that. But what is the league, or what do teams have to do to you to make you feel like they're respecting the flag or respecting the anthem again, to the point that you aren't turned off by it and that you'll come back to the game or care about the game in the same way again?
Well, after that game, I did support the Titans still because of the way that they responded. But they can say, these players can say, well, it's not the disrespect for the military or whatever, or country or anything like that. Yet they're taking the most sacred thing, the national anthem, and the fact that these our veterans died and everything else to give them the right to do things. You can go out and say whatever you want. It's freedom of speech, but don't do it during the anthem. Yeah. That is disrespectful. No matter what they say, they can say that, they're not disrespecting the veterans or the country or whatever by doing that. But that's ridiculous because they're choosing to do it at that one point where that is respecting the flag.
Yeah, Thomas, that's a good point. And I know a lot of people share your viewpoint on that. I've talked to a lot of the players, and I know basically to a man, I can't speak for all of them, but the guys I've talked to, it is not at all about the anthem. It's certainly not about the military or the flag. It's about, to them, an important cause that they're trying to raise awareness about. And I've said it. Anybody who's watched this program from the beginning, I have said it all along, that I think they missed the mark with the vehicle they chose to protest with. Their cause is noble. What they believe in is noble. Trying to make society better is something we all should be about. But the way they went about it by choosing the national anthem was a non-starter for like half of the audience. A bunch of people were like Thomas, who walked out of the stadium the moment they saw that. Other people turned off the TV sets. And it is still a problem that has led to these repercussions that I do think has a big impact on some of the ratings that you saw yesterday and with other games throughout the playoffs and throughout the course of the season. That now is what the NFL is going to have to try to remedy in the offseason. And that's the biggest problem with the protest, I think, is they lost the message. As good as the message may have been or should have been, they lost the message on a lot of people, because to a lot of people it became, I don't even know what you're talking about, but you're taking a knee during the national anthem to the greatest country on the planet and turning a blind eye to the flag or whatever. So I don't hear your argument. And that is the unfortunate thing for the guys who did it with well-meaning and who did it with the idea of, this is a way to let our voice be heard. This is a way to use our platform to hopefully lead to some change out there in society. Hopefully we do see some change. Hopefully these athletes have the positive impact in other ways. I'm not sure they're getting it done through the national anthem protest. Back to the phones we go. Lines are still open, by the way. 737-7767, the number. We say hello to Sonny. Sonny, good evening.
Hey, thanks for having me on. How you doing?
You bet. Doing well.
I think that everything that you've said to this point is contributing to the numbers going down. Everything from the way the players act to the political stuff. But I think there's another issue that's really affecting a large group of fans. This whole NFL rigged referee thing, I think the legitimacy of football is kind of like getting tainted in the midst of all this stuff. I feel like when you have teams, all the players come from the same pool, college, but yet you have teams like the Browns have never been to the Super Bowl. You have teams that just year after year after year keep winning. You watch these games like the Jacksonville game, and you're just so baffled by 5 penalties in a row when they're up. And now the tides change for the Patriots. I think there's a legitimacy thing going on also that's affecting the NFL. And everybody that I talk to, a lot of them say the same thing. Oh, the rest this, the rest that. And you start getting on social media and you're listening to all these people, blogging about, you hear about this. And it may be a conspiracy, but I think there's some truth to it, and I think that people are starting to go, people are just looking at it. It's not just fun anymore. It's becoming serious. They're looking at it, the political stuff. It's just like blah, blah, blah almost, But
yeah, Sonny, I have a bit of a problem with the idea that it's rigged for, let's say, a certain team, because for instance, you look back to the AFC Championship, you brought up Jacksonville. A lot of people were upset with the calls against New England in that game and the fact that they only had one penalty called against them. Well, they only had one penalty called against them the week before, too. This is a team that just doesn't have a lot of penalties. But yesterday, I think some of the questionable calls yesterday, and certainly the two big reviews in the game, went against New England. So I don't think it's always about that. I do think one thing that stands out to me when I look at what's going on in the NFL, and this sort of spans the refereeing to the political stuff to all that, is from the very get-go, fans turn on the TV to watch the game, to watch sports, to get away from it, and you kind of know what you're going to get, right? It's football, and you think you know what a touchdown is, and you think you know what a catch is, and you have these preconceived beliefs going into it. And lately, the NFL has sort of been telling you what you believe doesn't matter. This is what's in front of you. And whether that is how people perceive what happened during the national anthem or some of the domestic violence issues off the field and how the NFL has dealt with it, or the CTE stuff and concussions and what people think about that and how the NFL has responded in some way, or simple things like the catch or what is a touchdown. You look at things, and for a long time you looked at something and said, that's a catch. Sure looks like a catch to me. And then the ref would come out and say, what you believe to be a catch and what sure looked like it actually wasn't because this. And I think that, to your point, is right in that I don't think it's a conspiracy, but I think all of those things come together, and I think it's just disenfranchising to the viewer. You don't want to be challenged in what you believe and hold to be so true and dear, and the National Football League has essentially challenged all of us for years now to put aside what we believe or even know to be true because their facts or their reality in a catch or the anthem or CTE and concussions is just frankly different than what we believed it to be.
Mm-hmm. So you don't believe that anything that had to do with the Jacksonville game and the uproar over the officiating had anything to do with the more fairly called game in the Super Bowl, which in turn made it a better game?
Well, no. I think the scrutiny of the whole thing is the fact that it's the Super Bowl. I just don't. I mean, I watched it, and there were a couple calls in particular in the Jacksonville game that I didn't like. The biggest one I thought was the fumble that Myles Jack caused, that he might have been able to run it back for a touchdown had they not been blown dead on the field. But I don't think that's a malicious. I mean, that was a bang-bang play. They thought it was down. Heck, they didn't even think it was a fumble in real time. And so I just don't think there was anything malicious by it. It was a terrible, terrible break. I think the Patriots largely are a really good football team that doesn't break many of the rules. And they're been a least penalized team for a long, long time. And that oftentimes plays to their advantage in big moments. But I don't think the NFL's trying. I mean, come on. The NFL got shown up by the whole Deflategate thing. I don't think the NFL's trying to bend over backwards to make the Patriots look better. I don't think they're trying to anoint the Patriots any more than they have to. It's better for the NFL that the Eagles win.
I think that there is a from the fans, though, there is a sense that that's the case, that the NFL is propping up the big city teams, the Dallas, the Green Bay, these teams that it just always seems like there they are again. Well, the rest of the league kind of is like, what the heck? You know what I mean? The smaller market teams just aren't good. You know what I mean? It's crazy.
Yeah, no, I get it. And Sonny, I appreciate the call because there are people who believe that, and there are people who are certainly fatigued by the Patriots, fatigued by the same old teams. I will also say, just to the point about where teams are, and he brought up earlier the Browns never winning, and this year they went 0-16, and the Patriots are always in the mix. To me, that just speaks to a lot about your ownership and your organizational structure and who you have working for you. The Patriots are a well-run machine, and they've had as much coaching stability as really any professional franchise going, other than the San Antonio Spurs. And they have quarterback consistency, with arguably the greatest quarterback to ever play the position. That's why the Patriots are good every year. And the Browns can't find a quarterback. Since Tom Brady's taken over the Browns, I don't know the exact stat, but it's something like the Browns have started 30 quarterbacks since Tom Brady became the quarterback in New England. That's why one team's always in the mix and why the other team isn't. One team has a coach and a quarterback that stays the same every year, and they do the same things every year. The other team has a carousel of coaches and a carousel of quarterbacks, and they can't find consistency, and they can't win. I mean, closer to home here in Nashville, when you look at it, it was basically a decade from the last playoff appearance to now. Over that decade, the amount of times the Titans struck out in draft picks, in personnel decisions, coaching moves. I mean, you're talking 3 or 4 different coaches, from Jeff Fisher through Mike Munchak to Ken Wisenhunt to then Mike Mularkey to get to this point. When you go through 4 coaches in 9 years, you're probably not going to be that great. You go from the end of the Steve McNair era to Kerry Collins in the house, to drafting Vince Young, to all the controversy that surrounded that, to bringing in Matt Hasselbeck, drafting Jake Locker, dealing with that transition of those guys. Moving on from that, I mean, just decision after decision after decision with the Titans didn't work. And when your decisions don't work in the National Football League, you're not going to be any good. And so that, to me, is the biggest thing. As you look around at these organizations, when you see a team that's not performing year in and year out like the Browns or like the Titans were, like the Jaguars were, look at the organizational flow chart. Look at the decisions they've made. Look at who they've drafted. Look at the coaches and look at the quarterback. That will almost always tell you what the success level is going to be with the franchise. The Titans finally got it right. They finally got a head coach and a GM, at least briefly, that were on the same page. They drafted well, and they had a franchise quarterback in Marcus Mariota. And you know what happened? Give it a couple of years, and this was a team that won games and got to the playoffs. Jaguars, same thing. Get a coach, get a GM on the same page, draft really well. They don't even have a great quarterback necessarily in Blake Bortles, but they got him to play well enough behind a plan and get that team to the playoffs. Browns haven't done that yet. You know who has done that? Patriots, Packers, Cowboys, Seahawks. Why are those teams always in the mix? Stability. Coach and quarterback, stability. Let's try and sneak another one in here. Mitch, hello.
Hey, how's it going tonight?
Doing great. Thanks for the call.
What I was going to talk about is Nick Foles, the man that was lights out for the past 4 games of the season.
Fantastic.
I would, he's been passed around the league, 10 years now, been different teams, never gets a chance. They bring these young quarterbacks in and expect them to produce. Look what he did. He won the whole thing, and he's lights out. He was awesome in the playoffs. It's like they throw these guys in there and expect them to produce. Well, back in the day, because, I'm up in my upper 40s, I remember that when you were drafted, you sat for about 2 years behind somebody that knew what they were doing instead of being thrown to the freaking wolves like to do these guys. And that's the reason they get hurt, because they're coming out of college. You're playing against guys that are not the caliber of the men that play in the NFL. So that guy, the Titans, what they need to do, sit Marcus Mariota, let him sit behind Nick Foles and win a Super Bowl. Because if you had a quarterback that could stand up and show up every day like this guy did, you'd be going somewhere.
Well, Nick Foles was fantastic. Mitch, I appreciate the call. He was great. He was absolutely phenomenal in the postseason. 6 touchdowns, even caught one yesterday, 971 yards, so more than 300 yards a game for that Eagles offense. But a couple things there. He was terrible the last couple weeks of the regular season. So props to Doug Peterson for figuring out what worked, going back to some of the things that he had success with previously when he was a starter in Philadelphia back in 2013 and 2014, and making those adjustments to make the Philadelphia offense hum in the postseason. So give Doug Peterson, who, by the way, himself was a backup quarterback in the National Football League, give him credit for putting together the game plan to make Nick Foles so successful. Give Foles credit for learning it and then going out and executing it in the playoffs. He absolutely deserves it, and there's a reason why he was the Super Bowl MVP. But let's not go overboard here, because even in Philadelphia, Carson Wentz is a starting quarterback. He will come back next year, and it will be his job, because it was a 3-game sample that you got from Nick Foles. He wasn't any good at the end of the regular season, and they were really worried. There was a reason why they were underdogs to the Falcons at home after having the best record in the NFL. during the regular season. It's because Nick Foles didn't do anything as he came in the month of December. And so to say that he's a guy that shows up every week and just does it, I don't know, because he showed up 3 weeks in the playoffs and he did it. And that is certainly a massive stage to do it on. But he didn't actually do it during the regular season. He didn't play a full season by any means. So, you know, from a Titans perspective, Marcus Mariota's the guy. You believe that. You need him to get healthy. You need him to be there every week. And that's what you're building this team around. Nick Foles is going to get another shot to be a franchise quarterback somewhere because he proved that here. He proved that he had the opportunity to do that. But I also think his experience has built him up for this moment. I mean, you're talking about a guy who came in, flourished, 28 touchdowns, 2 interceptions under Chip Kelly's offense, but teams kind of figured him out. And the next year he really struggled to the point that he got traded away, goes out to L.A., struggles out there, ultimately falls behind Jared Goff when they bring him in. He gets released, actually asks for his release, goes to Kansas City, doesn't really play, ends up back in Philadelphia as a backup, a place where he splashed onto the scene, comes back as a backup. Finally gets his chance because of an injury, and he makes the most of it. It's an incredible story, and kudos to Nick Foles. Congratulations to him on this run. Congratulations to Philadelphia, because it's a story of perseverance. A guy who almost quit, almost walked away from the game because he was disillusioned by being traded, by being benched for a rookie that hadn't proved anything, then being released. He stuck with it, and boy, oh boy, did that pay off in this run for him, for his team, and for the city of Philadelphia. Great story. Take a break. We'll be back here on Sportsline.